welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a really interesting shift happening right in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's about secure communication.
Exactly. Specifically how practices are changing. We're going to unpack the U.S. House of Representatives' recent decision on, well, a hugely popular messaging app.
WhatsApp?
WhatsApp, that's the one. Our mission today.
Yeah.
To break down what this change means, the implications, and maybe what it means for you listening.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how quickly these things can sort of ripple out, especially for an app basically everyone uses.
Oh, we're ubiquitous.
And the House just formally banned it. WhatsApp gone from all government-issued phones and devices there.
Wow. So this isn't just some minor update to the employee handbook, then?
Not at all. It's a pretty direct response to some specific cybersecurity worries they had.
Okay, and the memo from the House Cybersecurity Office that really got into the weeds on why WhatsApp got flagged, right?
Yeah.
What were the main concerns?
Yeah, it did. The core issues they pointed to were, lack of data transparency and, maybe more critically, no encryption for stored messages.
Okay, let's break those down. Data transparency. What does that mean in this context?
Well, for the House, it means wanting clear insight into how a company, like Meta in this case, handles user data. How it's shared, even if the message content is encrypted.
So like metadata, who's talking to whom, when, that kind of thing.
Exactly that. And also the ability to actually audit those data handling processes. That's key for government.
And the other point, no encryption for stored messages.
Right. That's about data at rest.
Yeah.
So once the messages land on a server or even on your phone, are they still protected? The concern is they might not have the same strong end-to-end encryption that protects them while they're in transit.
I see. So transit encryption is one thing, but storage is another security layer entirely.
Precisely. They essentially tagged WhatsApp as a high security risk for sensitive government communications because of these issues. It signals, really, a move towards a much higher bar for digital security.
Okay, but work has to continue, right?
Yeah.
Communication doesn't just stop. So if WhatsApp is out, what are they telling people to use instead?
Good question. Yeah, staffers were explicitly told, delete WhatsApp. And here's a list of approved alternatives.
And what's on that approved list?
It includes things like Signal, Microsoft Teams, Amazon Wicker, and also Apple's iMessage and FaceTime.
Quite a mix there. What makes those platforms okay under the new rules?
Well, they each offer different strengths. Some, like Signal, are known for really strict end-to-end encryption across the board. Others, maybe like Teams, offer more robust data governance features, which is crucial for big organizations or government.
So they all met the House's new, tougher checklist for secure communication.
Apparently so. Each one satisfied those stricter criteria in some way.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because Meta, WhatsApp's parent company, they didn't just accept this, did they? The source says they kind of pushed back.
They definitely did. They argued that, hey, WhatsApp does offer end-to-end encryption. They even suggested that some of the apps the House approved might actually be less secure.
Ooh, okay. So that really gets to the heart of this whole debate, doesn't it? What does secure actually mean here?
It absolutely does. It's the core tension. WhatsApp is right. They do have end-to-end encryption for messages in transit. You send it, it's scrambled. Only the recipient can unscramble it.
But that wasn't the House's main worry.
It seems not. Their primary concern appears to be more around that data at rest issue messages sitting on servers or devices and the whole data transparency piece.
Right, the control aspect.
Exactly. For government use, especially with potentially classified or sensitive info, they need strong assurances.
Yeah.
Who can access data? When? Can we audit that? That level of control often isn't the priority for consumer apps, even encrypted ones.
And you mentioned this isn't happening in isolation. There's a broader context here.
Definitely not in a vacuum. Remember the earlier bans or restrictions on apps like TikTok? Big concerns there about data sovereignty, potential foreign access.
Yeah, national security related.
Right. And even scrutiny on AI platforms like DeepSeek over data processing. So this WhatsApp decision, it fits into a clear pattern. The U.S. government trying to seriously tighten the screws on app security and data control.
Okay, so stepping back from the DC bubble.
Yeah.
What does all this mean for the average person listening? For you out there? What's the wider impact?
Well, I think for starters, it just highlights a growing caution around data and cybersecurity generally, even for apps we use every day like WhatsApp.
It's a signal, maybe?
It's definitely a signal. These mainstream tools are facing more scrutiny, especially when sensitive information might be involved. It suggests that maybe just saying we have end-to-end encryption isn't always the whole story, particularly for certain high-stakes uses. Data governance, transparency, those are becoming bigger parts of the conversation.
And do you think this could influence the private sector? Could companies handling sensitive data start looking at their own app policies more closely after this?
I think it absolutely could. This kind of move by the House could set a precedent. You might see other government bodies, sure, but also private companies think finance, healthcare, legal reevaluating the apps their employees use for work.
Looking for more control, more transparency from vendors.
Exactly. It underscores a potential shift towards prioritizing really robust data security, the ability to audit things, and clear answers from tech providers.
So wrapping things up then, the main takeaway seems to be this clear, growing caution around our digital tools and data security. The House's move with WhatsApp is a very public example of that trend.
It is. And maybe that leaves us with a final question for you, the listener, to think about. Given this increasing scrutiny and these sometimes differing ideas about what secure truly means, what factors should really guide your own choices? What makes you trust an app or platform with your personal chats, your work messages? What's most important to you? Okay, let's unpack this. And honestly, it's a situation that seems to have officials, well, incredibly concerned, and it should certainly grab our attention too. Today, we're taking a deep dive into some really serious, frankly unsettling intelligence reports. We're talking about Iran's alleged threats of terror attacks right here inside the U.S. homeland. This deep dive is your crucial shortcut to understanding what's a very complex, high-stakes situation. We're drawing directly from high-level official confirmations and expert warnings.
Yeah, and just to set the immediate context for you, these warnings weren't exactly, shouted from the rooftops. It's quite fascinating, actually. They were delivered through what are called indirect diplomatic back channels.
Okay.
Essentially, these are discrete, kind of unofficial lines used to pass on extremely sensitive messages without, let's say, formal acknowledgement. The way they came through isn't just about secrecy. It suggests a calculated move, right?
Yeah.
It allows for deniability while still sending a chillingly clear message about Iran's potential escalation.
Deniability.
And all this, it's important to remember, followed a series of airstrikes on Iran's key nuclear sites. So it's a very, very tense backdrop.
That makes the how it was delivered almost as important as the what. So, okay, when we talk about these warnings, what exactly is Iran threatening? And what's the immediate trigger here that has everyone on such high alert?
Well, according to the sources we're looking at, Iran has explicitly warned it could carry out terror attacks inside the United States.
Inside the U.S.?
Yes. If its nuclear facilities are bombed again, that's the condition. Now, from Iran's perspective, they've accused Israel, with perceived U.S. support, of waging an undeclared war against them. And they vowed to retaliate by any means necessary. What's really notable here is this isn't just generic rhetoric. It seems like a direct quid pro quo tied specifically to their nuclear program.
By any means necessary. I mean, that sounds incredibly ominous. So what makes these particular warnings different, maybe more credible than, past rhetoric we might have heard? Are these just vague, saber-rattling type warnings, or are there concrete concerns that officials are genuinely taking seriously?
That's the key point.
Yeah.
What's really striking is how specific these threats apparently are. Officials say they are not vague warnings.
Okay.
They're talking about things like the possible use of sleeper cells. Those agents living seemingly normal lives until they're activated.
Right, hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. Also, crippling cyber attacks targeting American infrastructure and even covert operations right here on U.S. soil. Secret, deniable actions.
Yeah.
That level of chilling detail, that's precisely why this isn't being dismissed. It suggests, maybe an actual planning level.
Wow. I can only imagine the challenge of responding to things like hidden sleeper cells or cyber attacks. With threats that specific, it must have sent shockwaves through federal agencies. So how are they, and local law enforcement too, how are they responding on the ground? What's happening now?
Oh, absolutely it has. Homeland Security and the FBI are now actively coordinating with local law enforcement. This is happening in major cities across the country, really stepping up monitoring for potential risks.
And are they looking at specific places?
Yes, they're not just generally concerned. We're hearing specific targets like airports, government buildings, critical power grids. These were being watched very closely. And back in Washington, the situation is being taken extremely seriously. The White House is reportedly reviewing all military options very carefully.
Carefully, right, because they need to avoid...
Exactly, to avoid provoking a wider, more dangerous response.
Yeah.
Precisely because the whole battlefield could shift so dramatically.
It's clear this isn't just, abstract geopolitics. This directly impacts security right here at home. So, for us, for the listener, what does this all mean? What are the broader takeaways here?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the real challenge this highlights is that if this threat is real and not just posturing...
A big if.
A big if, absolutely. But if it's real, experts warn it could mark the beginning of a really dangerous new chapter. A chapter where Iran potentially moves the battlefield far beyond the Middle East.
Wow.
This wouldn't just be another regional flare-up. It could be a strategic pivot, using non-state actors or covert cells to directly target U.S. soil. That turns global politics into an immediate domestic security concern in a way we haven't quite seen before. So for now, American forces are definitely on high alert, and, well, the world is watching very closely to see how this plays out. It's a stark reminder, really, how quickly global conflicts can become domestic concerns.
Yeah, the gravity of this intelligence and what it could mean. It really hits home how complex and, frankly, precarious global security actually is.
It really does. And, one critical question that sort of bubbles up from all this is, how do nations balance these perceived threats to their own security against the immense risk of escalating global tensions, especially when the battlefield itself might shift in such unexpected, maybe even unprecedented ways?
That's a vital question to keep in mind as the situation develops. Something for all of us to think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We encourage you to continue reflecting on the intricacies of international...
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping straight into, well, a pretty urgent and rapidly developing situation globally. We're going to try and unpack the immediate breakdown, almost instantaneous, really, of a major ceasefire.
Exactly. Our goal here is to sift through those first reports, the claims and counterclaims that are flying around, and help you understand how a truce, which was meant to bring some calm, just shattered, literally within minutes. It's quite something to see unfold.
Okay, let's get into it. It starts with this big public announcement, right, from President Trump. He declares a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. He even specifically calls on Israel, tells them to pull their pilots back. Seems like a diplomatic win.
On the surface, yes. But here's where it, gets really interesting, as you said. Almost no time passes after this announcement, and then, boom, explosions are reported in Tehran.
Explosions, not just minor incidents.
No, not at all. The reports we're seeing point to direct hits. Specifically, an Iranian radar installation near the capital. And this wasn't, something that happened hours later as things slowly fell apart. This was immediate. Hours into the supposed truce, but really, it felt faster.
Wow. So minutes after peace, we get strikes on critical infrastructure like a radar site.
Yeah. That's
not a small thing. That feels like it implies something was already in motion, doesn't it? More than just a reaction.
Precisely. It suggests either incredible pre-planning that just ignored the ceasefire announcement, or maybe a hair trigger situation. It really speaks volumes about the underlying distrust. That kind of high-level diplomacy, even a deal brokered by the U.S. president, couldn't even pause hostilities for an hour.
And then, predictably, the conflicting stories started immediately.
Yeah.
Israel came out saying these strikes were retaliation, for alleged Iranian missile launches.
That was their official line, yes. Direct response. But Iran tells a completely different story. Yep. They flatly deny launching any missiles. Just, nope, didn't happen. And this is where it gets incredibly murky, the fog of war, conflicting narratives. Because if Iran is telling the truth, then Israel's actions look much more like a first strike, breaking the truce almost before it began.
Which obviously caused a lot of confusion and anger, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Widespread confusion, anger. It makes people question the entire premise. Was anyone actually serious about this ceasefire?
And President Trump's reaction to all this.
Yeah.
He certainly wasn't quiet about it. His language was pretty forceful.
Forceful is one way to put it. He was clearly furious, especially, it seemed, with Israel for breaking the ceasefire so quickly that, quote, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, that's incredibly blunt language directed at a close ally.
Beyond just the shock value, what does that signal, that level of public criticism?
Mm-hmm. Well, it signals immense frustration, perhaps a feeling that his own authority as the deal maker was undermined. It was a very public, very direct demand for Israel to stop. Pull back pilots, cease bombing. You just don't see that kind of public warning shot between close allies very often. It showed how personally invested he was and maybe how quickly things had spun out of his control.
And this wasn't just contained between Israel and Iran, was it? The fallout spread.
No, not at all. We quickly saw reports, drone strikes hitting military bases inside Iraq, 2 of them.
Which immediately raises fears of a wider conflict, of spillover.
Exactly. Those bases in Iraq are often flashpoints involving various regional players and militias. So hitting them is like poking a hornet's nest. And you saw the reaction. Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, they scrambled for an emergency meeting. They're urging everyone to get back to talks. It shows just how nervous the neighbors are getting. This stuff rarely stays local in that region.
So, putting it all together, where does this leave us? The ceasefire seems dead on arrival. What happens next?
Well, fragile is an understatement, isn't it? It seems non-existent now. The U.S. role becomes critical, especially with Trump apparently personally furious and making these public demands. That adds a whole new dynamic. But with strikes hitting Iraq, sirens apparently going off again in Tehran, the whole region is just incredibly tense, on a knife edge, really.
So, to quickly recap, a U.S. brokered ceasefire between Israel and Iran falls apart almost instantly, followed by strikes, denials, and some very, very strong public criticism from President Trump directed at both sides, but maybe particularly Israel.
Right. And it leaves us and you with a really important question to think about. When a truce like this, negotiated at the highest levels, can just evaporate in minutes amid all these conflicting reports, what does that really reveal about the deep-seated tensions? And maybe just as important, how does the rapid spread of these opposing narratives shape how we even understand critical events like this anymore? It's a lot to process.
Okay, let's dive right in. We've got some really urgent, fast-moving news coming out of the Middle East, emergency declarations, missile strikes. It's a lot. Our sources are showing states of emergency declared in both Bahrain and Iraq. This is right after Iran's recent missile strikes. What's your immediate take? Are these declarations just, procedural, or is this pointing to something much bigger brewing?
Yeah, that's really the key question, isn't it? My first thought is no, these aren't just symbolic, not at all. Declaring an emergency, even when there aren't immediate casualties reported, it signals a shift, a really profound one towards maximum readiness.
Maximum readiness.
Exactly. It gives governments powers to act fast, mobilize resources, maybe enforce curfews, control movement. Basically, it puts the country on a heightened alert footing.
So it makes the threat feel very real, very immediate.
Precisely. It shifts it from something abstract to something tangible right across the region. And what really jumps out from the source material is the targeting. We're talking specific U.S. military bases.
Right, Al Udeid in Qatar was mentioned, and installations near Baghdad, too.
And Al Udeid. Look, that's not just any base. It's a major U.S. Air Command hub. It's a huge symbol of American presence. Targeting it, even if nothing hit critically, is a strategic move. It feels like they're testing the waters, pushing the limits of escalation without maybe triggering that direct, massive military response.
Okay, so when Bahrain closes its airspace and puts its military on high alert, that's a very clear sign they're taking this incredibly serious.
Absolutely, a strong, immediate signal.
And it's not just Bahrain. We're seeing these really stark preparations coming out of Iraq as well. What's happening there exactly?
Right. Iraq's response is just as telling, maybe even more chilling in a way. Hospitals, emergency services, they've been told point blank, prepare for possible mass casualties.
Wow. Mass casualties, even with no initial reports of injuries from the strikes.
Yes, and that contrast is, well, it's stark. You have this high-level preparation for the worst, while at the same time, Gulf governments are publicly calling for calm. It highlights this really disturbing paradox.
So the lack of immediate casualties doesn't mean the danger isn't perceived as severe.
Not at all. It actually suggests the threat itself and the readiness for what might come are becoming the main tools here. It's forcing everyone to rethink security, maybe without overt military clashes, at least for now. It feels like a new phase almost, where that line between peace and conflict is getting incredibly blurry.
And Iran, meanwhile, isn't exactly backing down. Our sources say they're warning of more retaliation to come. Given everything we've just discussed, the alerts, the hospital prep, what does Iran's ongoing stance tell us?
It tells us the situation is deeply unstable and incredibly uncertain. Iran issuing these warnings, it signals they intend to keep up the pressure. Maybe they're probing for weak spots or just redrawing their red lines very clearly. The sources describe the sentiment as the Middle East is on edge and the situation developing fast. That's not just hype.
It feels accurate.
It really captures this environment where any move, even a non-lethal strike like this appears to be so far, sends these huge ripples. It activates complex, probably pre-planned responses across several nations. Understanding the speed, these layers of readiness, closed airspace, hospital alerts, it's really crucial for you listening to grasp just how fragile things are right now. It's about seeing the potential trajectory, not just what just happened.
Okay, so let's try to crystallize the key takeaways from this deep dive then. We've got these dual emergency declarations, Bahrain and Iraq. We have very specific, symbolic U.S. military targets being aimed at. And just this overall profound sense of heightened alert across the entire region. It feels like it's teetering.
Absolutely. And maybe here's something to really think about as you process this. How do we reconcile this striking lack of reported casualties in the immediate aftermath with these incredibly extensive preparations, almost chilling preparations for mass casualties? And what about the warnings of more retaliation? What does developing fast truly mean for what might be coming just around the corner? How could this kind of non-lethal escalation potentially reshape the future dynamics of the entire region? Welcome to a new deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into, well, a series of really impactful actions that have sent some serious ripples across India and definitely grabbed global attention. You've shared some compelling insights into Pakistan's recent strategic maneuvers before we started, and our mission today, really, is to unpack the different sides of what many are calling a bold move and figure out what it could genuinely mean for the region's dynamics.
Indeed. And what's quite fascinating here, I think, is how Pakistan seems to have orchestrated this multi-pronged approach. It's hitting several critical areas all at once. Airspace, border security, and then pushing diplomatically on Kashmir.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just isolated incidents, you see. It looks like a synchronized strategy.
Okay, let's unpack this then. First up, the skies. Sources are highlighting a, pretty sudden decision by Pakistan to extend its airspace ban for Indian aircraft. What's the immediate effect of doing that?
Well, the immediate effect is clear disruption. You get flight route changes, major delays. It impacts daily operations significantly. But if we look bigger picture, it's a very visible, very immediate point of pressure. It's almost like an economic lever being pulled.
An economic lever.
Okay.
So more than just inconvenience.
Exactly. Think about it. Longer routes mean much higher fuel costs, longer flight times. It's a bit like a hidden tariff, really. Designed to pressure India's aviation sector, maybe even cause some jitters in financial markets.
Interesting. And that's not all that was happening, right? At the same time, Pakistan's military reportedly went on high alert near the border. What does that signal, especially happening alongside the airspace ban?
It seems very connected. It's not just a show of strength, though. It is that, too. Some sources suggest this heightened alert serves almost as a strategic distraction.
A distraction? How so?
Well, it forces India to shift resources, shift attention towards its northern borders. That could stretch their defense focus, maybe create openings, or just generally set a more tense backdrop for the other moves.
Right. Setting the stage, as you said.
Precisely. For the diplomatic play.
Okay, and here's where it gets particularly interesting, I think. Diplomatically, Pakistan is raising the Kashmir issue again at the United Nations. What's the goal there, and what kind of backing are they getting?
This is really where the long game might be. Sources indicate they're bringing it up, potentially in places like the Human Rights Council, and crucially, with strong backing from certain allies.
So it's not just talk.
No, it seems the aim is to internationalize the whole issue again. Use global opinion, frame it as a broader human rights concern, put diplomatic pressure back on India that way. They want the international community to re-engage, essentially.
Makes sense. Now, India is calling all this a serious provocation. That's the term they're using. But Pakistan's perspective is quite different, isn't it?
Absolutely. Pakistan is framing it as a necessary step, something needed to, quote, protect its national interest. And this really highlights the core problem, doesn't it? This fundamental split in how these actions are seen by each side. It makes finding a way to de-escalate incredibly complex.
Because one sees a challenge to sovereignty, the other sees protecting interests in disputed territory. Have we seen this kind of coordinated action before?
Oh, yes. Our sources do point to past periods of high tension where you saw similar combinations of moves. Often these led to quite prolonged standoffs, not quick fixes. It just underlines the high stakes involved here.
Right. So to recap for everyone listening, we've seen Pakistan's bold move involving these strategic actions across airspace, the border posture, and this renewed international diplomacy push on Kashmir. It's a combination that's definitely caught the world's attention and, as some sources suggest, could potentially change the game in South Asia.
It's a really complex situation, no doubt. You have India perceiving this serious provocation, while Pakistan asserts it's taking a necessary step. That difference alone really underscores the challenge to regional stability right now.
It certainly has the world watching, so for you, the listener, maybe something to consider is this. How might these integrated actions across these different domains, air, land, diplomacy, truly reshape the geopolitics of South Asia? Not just the immediate shockwaves, but what could the long-term ripple effects actually be, maybe years down the line?